Thank you so much for coming this evening. We're so happy to have you with us for a very special lecture in our spring series, the inaugural Phil Patton Memorial Lecture, which we are so excited about. Many of you are here tonight because you knew Phil as a colleague or teacher. He was a key faculty member for our graduate program in design criticism from the time it launched in 2008. Phil taught a seminar called Typologies that I can honestly say changed the way many of his students, of which I was one, saw the world. And I was one of his students, and now I'm happy to be co-chair of this program along with Alice Trimlow. Thank you. Along with Alice Trimlow, our founding chair. And we are so pleased to honor Phil's memory on the eve of his birthday, March 23rd. And for years to come, we hope to continue this tradition. And so we've established this lecture, which takes a central spot in our spring lecture series, and will be delivered by a special guest whose work resonates with the research and writing of Phil. And tonight, we're thrilled for many reasons to have design historian Russell Flinchum in that role. First, he's a wonderful speaker, as you'll soon find out. No pressure, Russell. But also because Russell knew Phil well as a faculty colleague here in the design criticism program at SVA. And like myself and Phil, Russell is from North Carolina. Nothing could be finer. And more on Russell in just a moment. We're also very honored to have Phil's family with us tonight. I'd like to recognize his wife, Kathleen, and his children, Andrew and Caroline, who are here. And, yes, thank you. And many of his friends and former students, our alums, and some of our faculty as well. So welcome, everyone. So normally before introducing the Tuesday evening speaker, I talk a little bit about our graduate program here, but I thought that tonight it might be nice to do that through the lens of Phil, especially since we have so many alums here. So I'll just pause to say that all your burning questions about our program can be answered by our Spiffy website, including those related to our upcoming summer intensive, which is June 7th through 16th. After this evening's lecture, I'd also like to invite you next door to our studio for drinks and conversations with the speaker. So you exit this door and then enter at the glass doors by the elevators. And when you step out of this classroom, you'll notice a quote on the wall. What have we made well? How and why have we seen ourselves as often reflected in things as in institutions or places or practices? Why have we sought individually in the things we hold common, invested ordinary things with extraordinary meaning, so often sought the spiritual in the material? So that's Phil from his 1992 book, Made in the USA. And this chapter with this passage is reprinted in a new book published by the Cooper Hewitt and available in their shop as of this week. It's a collection of 40 pieces of Phil's writing with introductions by colleagues and friends. Many people in this room were contributors. And the images you see on the walls here tonight are taken from the book. And I'd like to thank Pam Horn, head of cross-platform publishing at Cooper Hewitt, her associate Matthew Kennedy, and designer Neil Donnelly for helping us with this. So thank you all. As you see from the Made in the USA quote, Phil liked to ask questions, not as a rhetorical device per se, but as real questions. If you were his student and asked him a question, he would often answer you with a question in good Socratic style. On his syllabus, every set of class readings was prefaced by questions. What can design learn from the material culture around us? How does design reflect society? These kinds of questions are truly the foundation of our program and what our students strive to answer not just in Phil's class, but in all their courses. These are weighty questions, and when confronted with them, even the most talkative grad students freeze up. And then you can be guaranteed that the next question will be, did you do the reading? Or, in more of a Phil voice, hey, did y'all do the reading? I thought I'd invite you into the typology seminar for just a moment, where I had the privilege of not only being a student, but being a teaching assistant for Phil. And Phil believed you could begin to understand design, even the most quotidian objects, by comparing and contrasting them. Riffing on Aristotle, he said, insight comes from analyzing what is the same and what is different in classes of objects. And that was the basis of his typologies course. Phil's way of seeing stuck with all of us students, and now it's hard to go 10 feet without seeing a typology, and I'm sure a lot of the alums will agree with me on that. Like in the window of the nail art salon I pass on the way to the subway every day. And here are some images pulled at random from student projects for the typologies course. Mousetraps, energy bars, vampire characters, Angela Rikers, and even concrete. So almost anything was fodder for study if you were in Phil's class, which was really liberating and fantastic. And even though the subject matter may seem trivial to someone from outside, Phil made you understand that it wasn't at all. And Phil's class was the genesis of a lot of great thinking and many really amazing projects. The investigation of concrete, for example, by Will Myers, went on to become a thesis and then a book co-published by MoMA and Thames and Hudson. Phil wrote about the everyday for a variety of publications, but he may be best known for his column in the New York Times, where he covered cars and car culture. So when I invited Russell Flinchum to speak this evening, he came up with a very apropos topic: women in cars, some new perspectives. Russell is an associate professor of graphic design, industrial design, and art plus design in the College of Design at North Carolina State University. Previously, he was the archivist for the Century Association Archives Foundation, and like Phil, he was a founding faculty member of the School of Visual Arts MFA in Design Criticism. He taught design history at SVA through 2013. And Russell was the first Peter Kruger Christie's Fellow at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, where he curated the 1997 exhibition Henry Dreyfuss, Directing Design. He is author of the award-winning book Henry Dreyfuss, Industrial Designer, The Man in the Brown Suit, and his most recent book, American Design, was published by MoMA in 5 continents in 2008. He is a friend and dear colleague to us all at SVA, and we are so honored to have him here tonight. So please welcome Russell.
Some new perspectives. Well, new perspectives started in July of last year when I spent a month in Philadelphia at Drexel University at an NEH workshop, and this now 57-year-old academic, I'll be gentle since this is being simulcast. I will not say I had my rear end kicked, but I got schooled. I got schooled. There were people there half my age, and thank goodness my roommate was 62, so I didn't feel like the eldest person there. But much of what I'm going to be talking about tonight is really a reflection of my shifting view as a result of this exposure. So all of a sudden, I'm interested in textiles. Y'all remember me talking about Annie Albers so much in the design survey, right? Okay. We'll come back to that. I want to start with this, not almost for the nostalgia, okay? Some people in this room remember the 1980s. And I don't know how old this card was, but I've had this card a long, long time. And the quote at the top was unavoidable at the time. And you can sing along with me if you want to. Language is a virus from outer space, and hearing your name is better than seeing your face. I don't really believe that, but it was omnipresent in the 80s. And I kind of want to re-evoke that, because in the 1980s, we were still finding our way. I came up here in 1985 to pursue a PhD at CUNY because there was no PhD in design available in the United States. And hey, it worked out pretty good. I finally got a job after 15 years, so, you know, pace yourselves. Those of you who've taken my class know how I cling to this image. Why? Because there's so much here, you know. And I still want to know the architectural backdrop, if anybody recognizes it. But the combination of the Dior model with one of Harley Earl's sculptural masterpieces, the 53 Roadmaster, has an appeal to me that it fills me with American pride, is all I can say, okay? You may not like Earl's aesthetic, but there's a lot of it, okay? And I show you this because this is a card that I saw in the presence of Paul and Phil. And this was one of the ones at the end. This was not one of the prize winners at the Concours d'Elegance, to give you some idea of what that was like. And I cannot urge you strongly enough, no matter how you feel about Greenwich, Connecticut, go see it once, at least one Concours d'Elegance in Greenwich, just to see the marvelousness. Go on American Day, or go both days, but don't go on European Day and not American Day, okay? Just do that for me. Because this is about glorious excess, and it's also about subtlety you don't see. Whatever is going on in that dip in the door is just marvelous, okay? It's sculptural, it's compelling to me. And the dollar grin, of course, it just says everything about post-war America at once, but it's missing the model. Yeah. And here's the model. And you know, the Dior new look is something, you know, I also love and I find compelling. But without the car, it's not quite the same thing for me. Actually, I find this image stunningly creepy. And I guess that's why I felt compelled to show it to you. I don't know who made it. They're very skilled. I've never seen anything quite like this that wasn't presented as conceptual art. But the point I'd like to make is there's a relationship between what Earl was doing and what Dior was doing. Okay? These are curvilinear, excessive, celebratory, victorious designs. I don't know that I've ever put all those words in one sentence. I don't think we've really gotten all the juice out of this lemon yet. You know, there's a lot here. Now, let me tell you the talk I meant to give to my dear friend. I was convinced, having shown this image for 20 plus years, and any good design historian will recognize it, that there must be more of this, right? Sonia Delaunay's models posed next to the clock tower at the 1925 Paris Expo. And simultaneousness, I'm trying to think of the right term for what Delaunay proposed she was doing at this point, but it becomes even more lavish just a few years later, okay? But the distinction I want to point out is not just that it's more lavish, but that this earlier car is the first mass-produced European car. And it's a boat-tail Citroën, which has been themed with the outfits that these models are wearing by Delaunay. And we see a greater sophistication, but we also see the models posed against a custom-bodied Talbot. There's a huge gap between those two, financially, price-wise, aesthetically, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly, there are no more. So I focused my efforts on going to the Concours d'Elegance Images Bank to look for all those wonderful coordinations between the great couturiers and the cuirassiers of the age, because I was sure that such an opportunity must have presented itself to designers other than Delaunay. And what have I discovered? Nothing. I have nothing to bring you from my original conception. I can only say never title your talk before you've written the talk. But this raises a lot of interesting questions. Why not? Is my first question. Why not? And it hit me in the shower one day. Well, we change our clothes every day. We don't change our cars every day. If you were really wealthy and you had a bespoke car, you might have had a summer body and a winter body, an open body and a closed body, but you didn't have a body for every day of the week. And that's part of it. It still doesn't explain why there are so few attempts to coordinate these two, even in the imagination. And so I came around the long way to trying to deal with this extremely problematic question of when do women show up in automotive design? What effect do they have? When does it make a difference rather than being a curiosity? How do we get to the Damsels of Design? Because that's as far as I can go tonight. And there's somebody at work very hard on a book on the damsels, and I don't want to steal her thunder, okay? So if you came here to see the Damsels of Design, you will if I hurry up. But this lecture is not about that. This lecture is about anonymity. This lecture is about images with no information attached. Why is this woman drawing a Mack truck in the early 1920s? How did she come to be doing such a thing? Who hired her? We have no explanation. We know one thing for sure. She's not sketching, right? She's not searching for form. She's drawing something that's already seems pretty well predetermined. And it is, if you look carefully, very much a Mack truck. There's no precedent for this. Who is she? Where she came from? Where did she go? We don't know. And yet, it's in Michael Lamb and Dave Hals's book for all of you to see. There's more work to be done. Where did they get the image? Okay? I am here to encourage a generation of young scholars to go down pathways that I don't have time to, frankly. I'm here to get you interested in looking more deeply at where women might have been that we don't suspect, and how they innovated in the world of automotive design. And I wanted to make us all honorary members of the Erika Schreiner fan club, but we don't, even with my German correspondence in Stuttgart, I have not discovered anything more about Erika Schreiner, except that she got a degree in automotive design in Germany in the 1920s, and apparently went to work for Dad. And I'm still waiting, okay? I started with this image that came from my friend Hampton because, well, you know, the word behind most of what I'm talking about tonight is marketing, okay? And this is marketing at a new high point. And this illustration comes in 1957. And notice that it's now interior styling, right? It's not just interiors, it's styling. And I just want you to look at that image for a moment, hold it in your mind, while I wax over to 3 of my favorite quotes. Now, some of you will remember these, okay? I like the first one because it's very high-minded, and it appeared in the machine art book, and it was, you know, Alfred Barr thought it was approved, and we all are agreed about the interrelationship of parts, blah, 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 okay? But I like the next quote even better. I saw this in the New York Times, got out my highlighter, as you can see. Theory is good, but it doesn't prevent things from existing. That's more Flinchum. That really is much more Flinchum. And then finally, in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice, and in practice there is. And once again, Yogi Berra nailed it, absolutely. Just repeat that as a koan to yourself on your way home tonight. Theory and practice, practice and theory. And here's my one little touch of what the hell is going on. Okay, what does the lecturer see in this image? Well, we're not surprised by the spool of thread, but look at her left hand. What can you not tell from that left hand? We can't tell if she's married or not. So it's ambiguous. Is this a progressive, young, creative type in 1957 trying to barge into a man's world? And you see, she's isolated. She's on one side of that table from the guys who are doing business in the background, and the guy in the middle looks to be the decider. That's how I interpret it. And the two gentlemen in the background, one looks like a manufacturer of products, maybe wheel covers or something like that, and they seem to be negotiating. But all of this is rather mysterious, except it's anchored by that Mercury Montclair. So we know it's 1957, and 1957 seems to me to be the year things change. 57 is the Damsels of Design, and 58 is the last great show by the Damsels under Harley Earl. So I'm building to this point, I hope. Again, those of you who've suffered through my class know where this comes from. This comes from Rayner Banham's favorite, my favorite article by Rayner Banham, in which he compares the Buick Royale to the Chevy Roadster, excuse me. The Type 41 Royale was called the Royale because it was made for royalty. He made 6, okay? This was made in the hundreds of thousands. In short, what was Banham about in the 1950s when he wrote this article? He was saying you could see more about culture in this car than you could in this car. You could see some wonderful things about this car. The Count, as you can see, is posed quite elegant next to his car, and those seem to be Plu 4s he's wearing, but most notable, his automobile has no headlights because he did not drive at night, which is the kind of decision you can make when you're having a car made specifically for yourself. I'm pretty sure all of these Buicks had headlights. And they all had portholes, because that porthole says what? I'm a Buick, all right? It still does. So Banham and his statement about popular taste versus luxury taste has always stayed with me. And for those of you who are not familiar with the history of automobiles, it's quite deceptive because some of the most beautiful cars are essentially unique. This is another coach-built Royale that looks nothing like the one I've just shown you. And of course, different bodies were done at different times, etc. Automobiles are wrecked, become increasingly more valuable. There's a story behind all of these coach-built cars. But let's drop back for a minute to the very origins of the automobile. Carl Benz, as a young man in the Motorwagen of 1988, would not be in this lecture tonight if it were not for a woman named Bertha Benz. What did Bertha Benz do? Anybody know? Bertha Benz took the car out of the garage and drove it 104 kilometers with her 2 teenage boys to go see her mother in Pforzheim. And she didn't tell Carl because she knew Carl would probably stop her, right? Carl said the car's not ready. And she said, yeah, it is. And she even stopped to tank up at a pharmacy along the way. So it truly defined an automobile journey at the very inception. And that, to me, is fascinating because I'm going to tell you, I don't think women are ever not a part of automotive history. You know, we have to recapture that history. Some of it is going to be irretrievably lost to us, but there's no reason we shouldn't keep trying. Think of Bertha Benz's example. Get it out of the garage. Put it out there. Let people argue about it, discuss it. Is it valid? Is it verifiable? Curved dash Olds. In American automotive history, it's the first commercially successful vehicle and the first break from the horseless carriage, defined by that curved dashboard. And what is a dash? A dash is there to keep the horses from flinging mud in your face, right? So I've learned lots of great automotive terms, the latest one being the pork chop. The pork chop is the transition in the front door of the driver's seat as it moves into the front quarter panel. And I was told that by Mary Ellen Dors, who's coming up in just a minute. That type of horseless carriage can be found in Europe as well, and can be found in the hands of the very wealthy. And here is the gay divorcee herself, Isabel J., on her spiker car. And that's what I love about this image, that it describes her as being on the car, because she truly is. She's not seated in the car. She's on top of the car. What else do we know? Well, who's that guy in white in the background? Well, that's her chauffeur. Why does she need a chauffeur? Because you still have to crank the car, right? And it's just common sense that you're not going to get down the street that's still pretty much heavy with horse dung to crank that expensive Dutch imported car. So that's why the chauffeur is there, and to change tires. And tires were, of course, in abundance. If you ever want to de-romanticize this period in history, read about changing a tire in this age, which you did about every 20 to 25 miles. I wonder truly why anybody bothered. Again, former students, the torpedo tour, right? We can't forget about that. How do we get from the horseless carriage to the unified beltline through this monstrosity called the Benz Blitzen? And you can find the footage on YouTube, and it's terrifying. Because these guys, and it takes two, because your mechanic is having to act as a counterweight on the curves. This vehicle hit 104 miles an hour, I believe it was, on a closed track. And its unified aerodynamic shell was immediately taken up by Mercedes-Benz and applied to its production cars, and it created a revolution in automotive design. You've also maybe seen these pages that I've shown from Merriam-Webster showing the progress of American cars, but let me just dip in here, top of the second page, the Model T. What does the Model T represent? The absolute opposite of coach built, right? I want to make cars as alike as pins, as Henry Ford put it. As I like to emphasize, the T was introduced in 1908, but was not mass produced until 1913 and stayed into production until 1927. 15 million units. And guess what? In 1927, nobody wanted them anymore. If you see the picture, which I wish I had included, but this is about women in cars, not men in cars, Edsel is driving Henry off the assembly line in the 15th millionth Ford, and they are distinctly downcast. It's a sad kind of a story. And it's not a very pretty story either. It's a highly competitive world in the early days of automotive manufacture, and its linkage to the packing houses of Cincinnati and then later, of course, Chicago is part of this entire mythos of the moving assembly line and how it revolutionized American production. It's not a myth, it's the truth, okay? Mass production changed this country forever. The mass production of the Model T I referred to as a shot heard round the world, because suddenly the Europeans realized the Americans can do something fairly sophisticated that we didn't even really think about. There were no mass-produced European cars prior to World War I. Detail from the dictionary page that I just showed you. We see that Phaeton with the unified beltline, the upper left, and then we see Harley Earl's LaSalle, the baby Cadillac, his first hit from 1928 in the center illustration. And I want to thank Gene Jennings, former editor of Automobile Magazine, who now has the first feminist website on automobiles called Gene Knows Cars. I urge you to go there. I would have pilfered from it endlessly had I had more time. But she clued me into this photograph. And yes, it's Clara Bow, the it girl, posing with Mr. Earl's LaSalle. So it is true. It is true. It is about Hollywood. Harley Earl started in Hollywood. Harley Earl's dad was a carriage builder, a coach builder. Harley went to Stanford, was injured in a rugby game, got a septic wound, didn't go back, stayed with the auto business. Don Lee bought Earl Carriage Works. The next thing you know, Harley Earl is designing for Don Lee, and he's designing cars for the first generation of movie stars. Fatty Arbuckle, Mary Miles Minter, et cetera, the great silence. And of course, Clara Bow in 1928, she's still the it girl, but she's been the it girl for quite a while now. She already has a Cadillac, as you can read for yourselves, and she wants that new LaSalle. Why? Because it's the fastest thing on the road. Okay, this smacks to me a little bit of a manufactured sort of event, right? Hot chick, hot car, Hollywood, publishable. As Mary Ellen Dorr said to me, Harley Earl understood marketing. Nobody was ever that direct in putting that to me. Harley Earl was making things for General Motors to market. What else did they have to market? Right? You had to make up something compelling for them to get interested in. Now, let me take my detour into the world of textiles. This is the world of textiles in 1929. This is what is possible in the world of textiles in 1929, and you are not going to find it in any automotive interiors in the United States, period. Just not happening. This is Art Deco work at the pinnacle in the United States in 1929 at the Biltmore in Arizona. And here is the pinnacle in American coach building at the time, Duesenberg SJ. I wanted to include Bev Kimes here because Beverly Ray Kimes is a figure who deserves a great deal of respect, a great deal of investigation, probably the best auto writer of her generation. Dorwin Teague, son of Walter Dorwin Teague, had her edit his autobiography because he said she's the best in the business. And I highly recommend to any of you who are interested her book, The Golden Age, which is about the 1920s and how American automotive design climbed to this climax that is the Duesenberg SJ. And any of you who follow the auction market know that these come at a tremendous premium today. This is the fully developed automobile. Everything has come together at this moment. We would all have a terrible time trying to manage a beast like this. No power steering, incredibly long wheelbase. It would be a demanding yet thrilling experience. But you'll notice it's very up and down, isn't it? Look at the door hinges, exposed on the exterior. So many details that we would find unthinkable today. The running board, et cetera, et cetera. What's the next phase? Streamlining, the aerodynamic body. The Sturkenberg, the international type of 1931-1932, the streamlined Beetle with the engine in the back. It appeared internationally, all at once. It does not seem that anyone takes priority of this. The Airflow, the first streamlined popular car in the United States, a tremendous failure. Why? Well, Dorwin Teague told me. He said, it was ugly. I agree. The airflow is much less impressive in person than it is in a photograph. And then finally at the bottom, Gordon Bureg's classic, the Cord 810, which truly set a new type form. Concealed headlights, pre-selective gearbox, front-wheel drive, and the absence of a conventional grille, which we'd also see in the Sturkenberg. So we have a rapid shift taking place, and the modern automobile is upon us. Here's the look of late 1930s. Look at the interior. Can you say drab? I mean, this is drab. They all were drab. What did you have to work with? Well, I think this was about what you had to work with. It looks like men's suit fabric. It practically was. It was wool, it was thin, and it wore out from sun rot, from spills, from tears. That was the state of the art. Where did I find this? In the collections of the Gregg Museum of Art and Design at NC State University. Any of you who are really interested in textiles, wait a year and a half and come down to Raleigh, because the Gregg Museum has a time capsule called the Timmy Collection that begins in the 1890s and ends in the 1970s, and guess what? None of it was thrown away. It's all there. It's all there. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and I mean the really ugly. The dark green sofa covering that your great-grandmother had. You know that one that was knobby and you couldn't stand because it felt so, yes, I know, you feel it. You can remember it, it's a tactile sensation. Well, it's all there, okay? And as you can see, just from these two samples, it's a marvelous range of things. So the first thing I want to point out to you is there are these hidden gems out there. Having lived in New York for 28 years, we all know everything that we need is in New York. Other people have some other things you might be interested in, honestly. You know, and the space demands in New York means that comprehensive collections get used heavily, things get destroyed, go missing, worn out, cannot be kept on view, cannot be handled, et cetera, et cetera. What am I trying to say? I'm saying, do your homework and look where you're not expecting to things, okay? Of course you're going to look for things like this at the Fashion Institute, but where else might they be lurking? At a college that, at a university rather, that has a college of textiles. Did you know that John Edwards, an erstwhile candidate for president a few years ago, was graduated of College of Textiles in North Carolina? I just thought I'd throw that in there for a little levity. Bill Friday, too, just to balance it out. Okay. Okay, we've got a candidate for a female automotive designer, and her name is Helen Dryden. And Helen Dryden is a great phenomenon in the late 20s, beginning with fashion illustrations, and she's surrounded by them here, as you can see. And they are what we expect from an American Art Deco aesthetic. You want proof? Here's proof. Okay? Helen Dryden next to the Studebaker Dictator. Now, those of you who are in the automotive business, I mean, there's a whole range of names that have passed into obscurity over the years. President, dictator, etc. But it's right there in plain sight. It's styled by Helen Dryden. What more do you want? You want a designer on the level of Raymond Loewy? Well, here she is, but it's worse than that, because she and Loewy were both supposedly working for Studebaker, and there's some ambiguity about whether she was working with Loewy or for Loewy. Okay, we don't know, but we've got another piece of evidence. And here's Helen Dryden standing next to the open door of the vehicle, which implies that She's done the interior design too. What do you see? Not much. The action in terms of automobiles up until the 1950s is largely on the exteriors. And it's a boys' game. And Mr. Earl, whom you see in the lower right-hand corner, is the top of the heap. 28 LaSalle, 38 Y-Job, 51 LeSabre, his personal rides, right? They're not show cars. They're his cars. They're his personal rides for him to show what's coming out of GM. A car for every purse and purpose, right? The differentiation. Well, you know what? You're not going to get a LeSabre. Only Mr. Earl gets a LeSabre. You might get a Cadillac with many of the features of the LeSabre in a few years, though, if you're patient. That's what it's about, and that's what Earl is leading with. Earl is an understated genius who has respect for women and their talents. And that is the untold story here, because Harley Earl terrified men. He terrified everybody, actually, but he was nice to women, so they were a little less terrified. My favorite anecdote of the week is this. What does this mean? That means Mr. Earl's coming. Earl was 6'4". Okay, if you've ever seen pictures of Lyndon Johnson buttonholing people, giving them the Johnson treatment, imagine Harley Earl, former rugby player, getting in your face. He was not called upon to be physically intimidating very often, because what was his favorite toy, so to speak? The telephone. Earl sitting at a meeting with the production engineers, having a little difficulty bringing them around to his ideas for a new, more curvilinear body shape, picks up the phone and says, "Alfred?" And who is Alfred? Alfred is Alfred P. Sloan. "Alfred, the boys from production are down here with me today. We're having a little discussion." "Yes, Alfred? Yes, Alfred? Yes, I'll be happy to tell them." Click. "Hey guys, it went against you." That's how Harley Earl worked. He was a vice president of design, and he had Sloan's ear, because Sloan was the one who came up with the idea of the families of vehicles in the tiers. He thought of every purse and purpose, and he found his man in Harley Earl, who was the counterbalance to, have you seen the pictures of Alfred Sloan in the heyday? He makes John D. Rockefeller Sr. look appealing. The man is, how shall I put it, almost reptilian in appearance. I was going to make some crack about geckos, but I'll leave that, okay? Right on the verge of creating the greatest cars ever, the war breaks out. There are no 1942 models, right? Because of Pearl Harbor. Everything draws to a halt. Welcome to the aesthetic of World War II. What is a Jeep? A Jeep is an acronym for GP, for general purpose, right? You also remember that he was a character in Popeye, that strange little creature called the Jeep. The Jeep is stamped. The Jeep comes in one color, olive green. I saw one of these at Rockefeller Center, mint out of box. It was the most shocking thing to see a Jeep in perfect condition with the original paint, because that green is hard to describe, my friends, but it's right there. What is it really? It's a Model T with four-wheel drive. It's a great simplification. It's something you tie things onto and drag them out of a ditch with. What's happening at the same time? Blue sky. What is blue sky? Over the horizon, after victory, when the Allies realized at the end of 1942 that yes, the war is going to go in their favor, everything changes. Because suddenly, the terror is not so much the enemy as the idea that we might sink into a second Great Depression at the end of the conflict. So America begins priming the pump with schemes for greater and greater consumer production after victory. How do we know this is Blue Sky's car? Look at the license plate. What do you read? 194X, because they did not know if the war would be over in 45 or 46, right? And what have we got here? One of the great renderers of the time, Frank Hershey, showing us a Cadillac that never even came close to being built. But look at all that glass. Okay, I'm going to throw this out. I'm not going to say it's true or false. I have been told that the shift to the design of these interiors is predicated on the greater presence of glass. Because now people are looking in your car instead of at your car. And Earl, of course, what's his mantra? Lower, faster, wider, longer. It sounds like a Daft Punk song. Just keep repeating it to yourself. You know, how low is too low? How low is too low? Well, I guess when it scrapes the driveway, you know? I mean, look how low Earl was sitting in his LeSabre, and he's 6'4", okay? Well, it's my new sweetheart, Mary Ellen Dorr, who saved this lecture for me because she had some facts for me. Thank God. Mary Ellen Dorrs went to Pratt, graduate of class of 1950. She remembered Alexander Costello, very, very well because he would address the class. He was a Persian, she said. So he would say, "Good morning, boys and girls," because she was the only girl. Earl wanted a woman in Detroit so badly, he went to Pratt and said, "I need somebody, and she needs to be female." And Costello said, "I've got her." And it was Mary Ellen Dorrs. She was 20 years old when she moved to Detroit. She couldn't even sign in until she was 21, a few months later. And she went straight to interiors, and guess what she found? A man's world. This wasn't even a locked studio. This was the interior studio. And she was right up against the male chauvinism. And she told me the most delightful story. All the girly mags came out at the same time every month. I'm trying to think, what was a girly mag in 1950? I mean, Playboy hadn't even been invented yet, so I presume it was Esquire, et cetera, et cetera. And the guys would come back, and they would sit on the table, they'd pull open these magazines. "Oh, how about that, huh? Why, huh? What do you think, Bill?" Mary Ellen Dorrs had enough one day. She went out and bought a male bodybuilding magazine. Came back to the studio. I was like, "Hey. And Bill Dennis came over laughing, patted her on the back, and she was fine with everybody from that point forward. So that's the strange bifurcated world of the 1950s. You could be one of the boys if you made the right gesture. This is what I can't figure out. This is where I need some theory. All right? On the far right, what is that? There is no way that is a contemporary picture from the 50s. All right? That is an 80s idea of the 50s. Right? Fiorucci. Right? Looks just like that. What are we looking at on the left? Cyndi Lauper's mom? I mean, where is she? Where is she? What is that steering wheel attached to? And then we have what appears to be an actual female driver in a really nicely upholstered interior. What's going on here, people? Well, it's getting really complex really fast, okay? Because now another thing has come in and people are actually starting to think about safety and ergonomics. 1953, Henry Dreyfuss calls Julian Everett, Alvin Tilley, and Anne Shortess into his office and says, we got to do something about this human engineering stuff. And this is Josephine I, and she goes all the way back to 1953. So she's part of the picture too. When we read about Suzanne Vanderbilt as one of the damsels of design and her focus on ergonomics, let's remember that there was a starting point, and it was probably within the Dreyfuss office. The person I want to talk about just briefly, and the person who deserves a great deal more work, is Mary Ann Scher, who just died recently. She lived in Raleigh for many years. She was our star. Mary Ann Scher was the director of the product design department at Pratt for many, many years. And incredibly, somehow, she would go through that job every day, and then she'd go to the studio. And what I'm wanting to know is, how did she do it? Mary Ann Scher's papers are going to the Archives of American Art, where they'll be available to all of you. And here is a picture of Mary Ann Scher from last year with one of our students who's going to graduate this semester, Laura Weicker, who taught high school for 6 years before deciding to become a metalsmith. And there she is with Mary Ann Scher, who's taking sheer delight in the fact that her bracelet cuff matches Laura's hair. And that's another one of the special things about working with an artist, designer, craftsman, and Mary Ann Scher was all of those things. And Mary Ann Scher was married to Sam Scher. Sam Scher was an industrial designer of the first water. Scher and McDermott was based in Akron. Why? Because Mary Ann grew up there. Mary Ann was an industrial designer along with her husband. She was not just a jewelry maker. And they both were offered positions with Chrysler and turned them down because they wanted to create an industrial design office on their own. And Sam Scher's entire archive is sitting in special collections in D.H. Hill Library at NCSU. And they're in beautiful order. So, any of you like to come down to Raleigh and do a little research with me? We got plenty of stuff to work with. I cannot wait to dig into the relationship between these two designers, because you know that even if they were working on separate products and projects, they were talking about it the whole time. How could you not be? If you're going to the studio at night after working a 9, 10-hour day, you're pretty involved with design, right? Now, another suggestion for those of you wanting to dig. How many of you are familiar with American fabrics? My purpose is achieved. I have made you aware of American fabrics. American Fabrics begins publication in 1948 and runs through the 1970s, and it is the most deluxe publication on fabrics, bar none, in the United States. They've got Leger doing the cover in '54. What I'm going to lay out for you quickly, and I'm running out of time and I'm sorry about that, is 54 versus 57. Walk with me through this. Color as a Practical Medium by Howard Ketchum, one of the co-founders of American Fabrics, America's favorite color expert. Industrial materials in a fabrics magazine. But how do we show it off? With a one-off car designed by Virgil Exner and hand-built by Ghia in Italy. This is a truly eye-grabbing car. What else do we find? color and pattern for the first time. And what do we see in the upper left-hand corner? The old horseless carriage with its mildewed, wool-based, moth-eaten quality versus this incredible new Chatham upholstery that will it will repel water, it will resist mildew, and it brings the promise of color and pattern to the interiors. Virgil Exner, fascinating character. I urge you all to read about Exner because he is always out there as almost a gadfly in the automotive business. He, in a sense, dethrones Earl, not personally, but with his designs. And here is his Ghia, and I'm showing it against the boat to give you the long historical picture, which is the techniques used for boat building are applied directly to carriage building, and carriage building leads directly to automotive design. So the curvilinear qualities you see in that boat are functional. The curvilinear qualities you see in the Chrysler Ghia, maybe not so much so, but look at what's happened, right? There's not just the removal of the running boards, but it's tucked in underneath. Do you see that? When you do that to the rear of the car, Tucker, you know what that's called. It's called baby acid. Car buyers want color. Show cars now get involved with the interiors. Look at this. Over-the-top jacquard intended for this one-off designed by Exner with a glass roof. The new jacquard trend in automobile upholstery, and we're at 56. And these are not the Damsels, they're the Motorama models. And I just love the bottom right-hand corner. I mean, this is just so predictive of the 1960s. 1957. Let's spare no expense. Let's get Henri Matisse to do our cover. What do you see when you turn it over? Not an ad. You see a back also by Henri Matisse. These guys stopped at nothing. Look at this ad. Willful distortion. I mean, look at this car. How do you describe that shape? And look at all the little doodads that we're inventing down in the right-hand corner, but it's really about introducing these textiles. How sophisticated is our audience? Well, do you put an ad like this in front of people who don't know who Toulouse-Lautrec is? This doesn't mean anything without that reference, does it? We are moving into a more sophisticated America, and here are the Motorama styles, beginning in 51, leading up to 58. The debut of the Corvette in Paris sent a shockwave through the auto industry, and it's the origins of the T-Bird. And when I went to see Nancy Powell at the College of Textiles, this is what she pulled out. Do you see what has happened? Standardization by models and makes. Boom, in 1957. Almost as if by magic. What else? Miracle Mylar, 1957. The Damsels, 58. But when would the designs have been done? 57. I love this. Peggy Sauer in her carousel station wagon with the hold-it-all back seat for this charming little child. And then finally, we come full circle to that woman with short hair that I introduced you to at the start of all of this. What's happening to American women? I'm not going to go there, but it involves discipline, apparently. My final slide. What goes into automobile styling by Harley Earl, published in American Fabrics in 1957. Almost a sayonara. Earl was gone in 58. He took a summer vacation. The boys from the studios, got a peek through the chain link fence at the new Plymouths that had been designed by Virgil Exner, and they panicked. Earl's excessive, bloated line of 1958 was a disaster for GM. It was also the Eisenhower recession. Earl quietly slipped out of the picture and managed an industrial design firm for the rest of his working career. There's never been anybody like him before or since. The man who came after him, Bill Mitchell, excellent designer, an absolute, unforgivable male chauvinist. Okay? He got rid of the damsels. He said, quite pointedly, I'm not going to have any women in the photo with my design chiefs, period. That was Bill Mitchell's attitude. So what we've seen in this little, whatever this was, Salmagundi, is a very special moment in which we've seen women rise to the top only to be felled at the last moment by the boys' club. There's another phase to this story, and that comes with the redesign of the Ford 150 truck. But that's another story. So I hope that if this
was... You said that this all came about from you were doing some sort of study with the NEH, you said.
It was a summer workshop, and there were 26 of us.
Can you talk more about if there's anything specific that inspired your interest in looking at women's role in automotive development? Can you talk any more about that? Was there any personal experience or?
Yes.
Okay.
I was introduced to feminism. I had a drink, and I asked for seconds.
Wait, Russell, you were introduced to feminism 2 years ago?
No, this July, this past summer.
Just checking.
Yeah. I know I'm not very good at it, but I'm trying very hard. Working with people half your age is truly fascinating. And what I really, really wanted to get into here that I couldn't even touch because it wasn't there was fashion, you know? And I want to say, have you noticed how costume history is turning into fashion history right before our eyes? What does that mean? Is that just a change in names? What do you think? David, please.
Well, I'm going someplace else with this.
Okay.
So when GM introduced Mary Barra as the first women CEO, part of the introduction was, and she's a car guy, which was a very meaningful thing because there's this cultish thing about automotive design that normal designers don't get it.
No.
And what is it? What is the thing that car guys get?
Gasoline in your veins.
That's what they say, but
yeah.
what is it?
What is it?
Why is
What a little-
more prosaically? Why is car design so different than designing anything else?
That is a truly tough question that I think will take more time than we have here. But
I
it
got all
was,
that.
but it, I think it has its origins in the fact that, you know, coach building was a nasty, hard business. You know, I don't think many women would have been attracted to it just on the basis of what it involved in many ways. Why is it a man's business? Because I think of these guys as working 14-hour days, smoking continuously, drinking probably on the job, cursing constantly, and chasing women when they were not on the job, frankly. I mean, these, and you know, these closed studios destroyed marriages. I mean, I don't know quite how to describe it, but yes, it is a prominent fiction that you're either a car guy or some kind of other designer. And I think it's a fiction now, because I'm working with young female industrial designers, and they're capable of doing anything you want. I just had one switch from ID to graphic design, and she did it in her last semester. And I applaud it, because she wants to go into biomedical. And I'm going to tell you that I think graphic design and product design are going to merge in areas like this. I don't think there will be a distinction in 10 years. I don't think there's going to be a distinction between exteriors and interiors of cars. Actually, cars are more important today from the interior than the exterior. I own a 2014 Corolla. Try to find that gray, slate gray Corolla in a parking deck. It's impossible, because the Hyundai looks like it, the Kia looks like it. They're all the same aerodynamic shape.
The ping pong ball on
Yeah.
the
But the real point is, where is there to go in exterior design except to greater excess? Have you seen how much chrome is on the front of a Ford 250? Well, I have. Every truck in Raleigh is red, and every truck in Raleigh is a showboat, practically. Okay, what I'm trying to say is, I think the action is moving to the interior because all the temptations are on the interior. There's all this tech there that was not there even 10 years ago. Rear view cameras in basic cars, you know, automatic heat and air conditioning, stuff like it's you know, adjust the stereo from your steering wheel. These are things that were unthinkable when we were growing up. It was unthinkable of having a car that would go 3,000 miles without servicing when we were growing up in the 70s. They were so badly built. I think let me put it this way. One of my favorite students at State is originally from Korea, and he's completing a master's design, and he won the GM prize this year. And he won it for his study of the interior fascia of vehicles. And he won it by doing studies with a GoPro camera of where people's eyes were going while they were trying to figure out, where are the controls in this zip car I just rented? Because they're not in the same place as my Kia. That's where the action is right now. Those horrible displays that they put in there, right? They're all over the place. Different sizes, shapes, everything. Some are touch screens, some are just displays. There is a lot to figure out because you put that much stuff in there and you're actually creating a safety hazard. What this really showed was that drivers were distracted by the placement of these controls. And it's all about styling, and it's all about these car companies trying to put a little va-va-voom styling onto the interior like they used to put it on the exterior. It's the equivalent of putting chrome and tail fins in the interior. That's my take on it, which is lightly informed. But thank you. Yes, please. Pam.
This may be an analogy, but you did bring up the last slide about the curve of the boat and the curve of the car. Is there a relationship between women in car design and women in boat design that's similar? Would you know any of this? Is this a whole new course of study?
I know absolutely nothing about boats except it's a hole in the water that you pour money into. No, let me say this. One of the greatest car designers was Bob Gregory, who worked for Ford during the Edsel Ford years. And Bob was a gentleman, very dapper, and his heart was in boat design. He never, he came and went from the car business, from boats, and went back into boats. And I think that says a great deal about the really, really, really good guys in design. And I see no reason women aren't completely capable of doing that. It's a body of knowledge that is there for anybody now. I think that's what we have reached a point where technology has leveled the playing field, and you can teach yourself on YouTube. So that's my take on it. We're in a new world, and I think it's going to be important for women to be insistent to get into industrial design programs to make a change. Okay? We know the political environment we're dealing with today is almost impossible. So let's think about other routes that we can take to realize change. And until I think women constitute 50% of industrial designers, we're not really going to see that flip. But I don't see anything stopping that from happening. And each year there are a few more women in the field. Tucker.
I would say this, I think the flip has already happened in school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm teaching at Parsons and there's only 4 males in the class. The other 50 or whatever are women. And I think that's because, I don't know, this might sound sexist, but I think like women are predisposed to being collaborators and working in teams, and that's what design is all about.
Yeah.
And so the problem is not going to be women in the future, it's going to be men. How are we going to get a job? That's what I'm...
Well, I'm just looking to make it to retirement at this point, Tucker, you know. Hi, Alan.
So there wasn't, you didn't find any, sorry. Thanks, Russell. You didn't find any evidence of like post-war, like all of the women engaging in the labor force during the war, World War II, didn't seem to continue after the war and then flip from manufacturing to design.
Nope.
No Rosie the Riveter kind of like.
Nope. Nope. Everything pushed against it, frankly. They didn't want the women hanging around. What I get from reading the histories was, thanks for your contribution. Your job goes to a man because he's the breadwinner for a family. You've had this job because he's been at war. Thanks for your service. See you later. Yeah, well, I mean, if you read about the aftermath of World War I and the violence that came about because of the employment crisis, and you don't have to go any further than Winston-Salem, North Carolina to find it, okay? You know, that is part of this reality too. People returning from war and expecting jobs to be waiting for them. And what is the government going to say to that kind of demand? We're talking about guys with guns, you know? I hate to be so blunt, but, you know, they were not just going to sort of say, oh, sorry about the misunderstanding. They were dead serious. I've been in the Pacific and I want my job back. So that's the political climate, and Harry Truman, having served in World War I, saw it their way. That's all I can say is, you know, at a certain level, we come down to the fact that it's individual people. You know, one of my favorite anecdotes relating not at all to any of this. Do you remember the little scandal a few years ago when Daniel Patrick Moynihan's letter about Pamela Harriman got published in Louis Alpenclaus's book? You know, and it turns out that Louis Alpenclaus didn't like Pamela Harriman very much. And it all ended up, after all this fracas, with Alpenclaus saying, well, in the end, we are all different people. And that's sometimes the answer. It's not, you know, a very powerful or conclusive one, but sometimes we are just individuals, and we pursue our own bliss and our own agenda. And some people are willing to be more ruthless to push their agenda forward. And that's why collaboration becomes so important, because I think, Tucker, you really summarized it beautifully, is could a Harley Earl even exist today? Only if he owned the company, you know? And yes, I think women make great collaborators. I like mixed teams, though. I like mixed teams because I think there is more creativity taking place when you put boys and girls together and you know, give them challenges that they're not expecting because they're not used to it, right? Making boys sew is such a great thing. Let me just put it that way. Okay. Yes, please.
I'm curious about women not as the designer of the car, but as the driver, because even as towards the end of the 60s, an average-sized man could buy a General Motors car with manual steering, and it would double the size of his arms because it was almost like a weightlifting machine to drive that thing, and just yank the steering wheel around, and even the shifting sometimes was like weightlifting. And so when General Motors was getting ahead of the pack on the interiors, were they also in the lead on introducing power steering, power brakes, and tires that didn't weigh 100 pounds, so you could change, one woman could change it, and so on?
I can't speak to all of those, but of course, GM was big on the hydromatic transmission. That was one of their big selling points in the late 1930s, if I'm correct. The introduction of the electric starter in 1912 was a revolutionary event because it doubled the driving population. Because really, cranking that car was the single greatest barrier to women drivers. But I know exactly what you mean, those big boats of the 50s. You also recall that they had a doorknob-like attachment that you could put on the steering wheel, so you could do this.
Those became known as suicide knobs,
Yes.
because they would catch on your wrist,
Yes.
and they were dangerous.
Yes, and they were fun, which meant they had to be banned.
But because of this, how difficult it was to turn that wheel,
Yes.
which is not really very good design mechanically.
Well, the American automobile as good functional design is not something I broached in this lecture. I'm not going to defend the mechanics of GM's greatest cars, but they were fast and they were powerful, and that's what most people wanted. That small block V8 was a revolution for people, and I don't know anything about women drivers. I really don't. I can't speak to that. I don't know what the barriers were perceived of at the time, or if models were favored, et cetera. That's a big blind spot. But I think what you pointed out is incredibly important, is what did it mean to drive a car in this day and age of excess? Thank you.
Okay. Hello. I want to ask a question as a woman driver. Okay. I like driving a lot, and sometimes on the traffic, I have these reactions of woman driver. Of course, like you make the turn and then. Get some reactions because of gender. And I was thinking about it for a while, actually, that I guess I believe in gender equality, but we're not the same, male and female, and the way we interact with the products are different, I think. Also, like you talked about styling a lot. Like, it's different for how appealing a product is different for women and men. And also functionality-wise, we interact with cars in different ways. And traffic is like we women and men drivers are in the same fluids, in the traffic. So, of course, like, to sum up, woman has contributed in the styling and interiors and how the car looks, how is in its aesthetics. I'm curious about if you know any contributors in mechanics, as the previous person asked as well. Did women get involved with the functionality of the car beyond the aesthetics and styling?
To my knowledge, I have no knowledge of that area. I don't know anything about women and
Okay,
the actual
and-
engineering of cars. My whole interest in cars has really been predetermined about styling. And even to shift to interiors has been a major sort of change for me.
So what is, because there's 4T, and then the functionality of the car changed a little bit based on maybe the regulations, accidents to improve the driving the car experience. But what is actually changed since then?
Cars are
except, like,
tremendously safer.
They're
Tremendously.
safe. They got safer with little improvements, and then what I can see is changing in the style a lot. The brands change their
Well,
how they look.
we're in an age of convergence in which we're watching, the number of manufacturers and the number of platforms constantly reduced, right? So what we as consumers don't really understand is this all begins with the platform, okay? And that's where we need to gain an appreciation of that. We need to understand how that platform's changing, because that's changing radically. It's going to be before long something like a grandiose electric skateboard, and we can put whatever we want on top of it. I'm serious. Yeah, maybe a hoverboard. Okay.
It sounds like one of many conversations we could continue over the next
Yes.